Hello and welcome to Just a Damn Nerd. And today, we're doing another episode of Versus. And we have a real treat today as we have two of the most legendary survival horror video games ever made. First up, we have Alan Wake. Now, Alan Wake is one of the better psychological style horror games I think I've ever played. It takes great inspiration from the great Stephen King's novels and has the great Sam Lake as its writer. Alan Wake's story is truly outstanding, especially in the horror genre. This game is so much fun and absolutely benefits from its new facelift and its recent move to 4K with top-end visuals on modern hardware. Its opponent is literally the OG, the godfather of survival horror games. Resident Evil 1 put survival horror games on the map, but Resident Evil 2 is what made survival horror popular. The remake is one of the best received games of all time. Resident Evil 2 is still as much fun as ever, and while I admit I have a couple issues with the remake, none of them will be a problem here, as Alan Wake literally takes on its grandfather. Let's see if the young up-and-comer can upset the long-time champion of survival horror. So, we have a nice bracket here. This is every game that will be competing in Season 1 of Just a Damn Nerds Versus series. We want to crown a Season 1 champion. Then sometimes after Season 4, we're going to take the 4 champions from the first 4 seasons and put them against each other. But, we want to crown a Season 1 champion. What you see on the screen now is the tournament bracket. Now, we haven't advanced any teams yet, but we have had 2 matchups. We are going to advance the teams in just a minute so you guys can see who won. I was going to wait a second and put spoilers on it. If you guys haven't seen the first 2 videos yet, I suggest you go watch them. They are The Witcher 3 versus The Elden Ring and Halo Infinite versus Doom Eternal. Now, we do set categories here, so we are not going to have close matchups every time, but that doesn't mean they won't get close. So as you can see, Halo Infinite managed to lose to Doom Eternal, even though Halo Infinite had built a 9-point lead at one point. But the later rounds favored Doom more, and Doom was able to come back. The Witcher had a pretty comfortable win over the Elden Ring, but The Witcher is one of the greatest games of all time. It's going to be very hard to dethrone it. Now, moving to the tournament bracket means we have to have a uniform rule set. If you watch The Witcher 3 versus The Elden Ring, and you watch Doom Eternal versus Halo Infinite, you will see that the rule set is different, but not anymore. Coming on the screen now is the rules that will govern every versus match going forward. So, graphics and performance are obvious. They are self-evident. However, engagement, we replace multiplayer with engagement because so many games don't have multiplayer. So what engagement actually is how long you want to play the game for and for how long you're enjoying it. For example, a game like Skyrim has a 10 engagement, but it doesn't even have a multiplayer. Why a game like Battlefield 4 would also have a 10 engagement, while single player is garbage, its multiplayer carries it through. I haven't decided yet how we're going to do pure multiplayer games, but we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. Story is self-evident as well. Immersion is just how good the game does of pulling you into its game world. How much it makes you want to keep playing it. How much it makes you forget time is even passing. Those games that you look down and you play them and you look up and it's midnight, those games are ultra high immersion. And finally, fun factor is a combination of all of these categories, but it's not as simple as a number metric. This is basically just how much fun a video game is. Sometimes games can be more than the sum of their parts. All of these categories could go to the other game, but the other game may just be way more fun. For example, if you put Resident Evil 2 original versus most modern games, it would lose most categories, but it would get a 10 in the fun factor. Now, we don't assign points based as a whole. Instead, we assign points based on how much better a game is. So, for example, say a game is 70% better than another one, it'll get 7 points, the other game will get 30. This way, we have more interesting competitions, and they're more fair. Because the game shouldn't get all 10 points just because it won a category by 1 point. That's not really fair. But before we get into that, please hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps out small YouTube channels. Also, guys, if you're a small YouTuber and you hit that subscribe button, let me know so I can subscribe to you as well. Us small YouTubers have to stick together. It's the only way we're ever going to have a chance. Now, we're going to show you a 30-second clip of both of the games. And then we're going to put the two games right next to each other, and I'm going to explain to you what I like about both games, and then I'm going to tell you who was the winner and how many points they got. Here we go with graphics.
Round 1. Fight!
I was going to give the kidnapper all the manuscript pages I had for Alice. If that wasn't enough, I'd hold him at gunpoint and make...
So as you can see, Alan Wake and Resident Evil 2 both had excellent remasters / remakes. Resident Evil 2 is definitely a massive visual improvement over the original, but to be honest, what wouldn't be? What I was really impressed with Alan Wake is a simple upscaling of the original game. And something about running around in the dark forest at night is definitely appealing. I think maybe even a little bit more appealing than running around a mansion. However, Resident Evil 2 has all kinds of fancy tricks, like ray tracing and bloom lighting, that makes the game look even better. When we start comparing these two games to try to determine a winner, both games have some issues. As you can see here in this clip, Alan Wake has some parts that look really bad. Character models didn't get much of an upgrade, and some of the texture work looks freaking terrible. And then basically anytime Alan Wake is during the day, it looks pretty bad. While Resident Evil 2 is held back by unbelievably awful performance. Even on a super powerful PC like mine, it will randomly lurch frames, drop frames, and sometimes just opening a door can cost you 75 frames. This really shouldn't happen in a game that has been out this long, but unfortunately it does, which means Capcom is most likely never going to fix it. I distinctly remember Digital Foundry talking about this being a problem with this game when it came out, so clearly there is no fix coming. So this one was incredibly difficult. Both games have visual qualities and visual shortcomings. Alan Wake, I think, looks a little nicer, while Resident Evil 2 is more technically impressive, but it does pay for it with a rockier frame rate. For the first time ever here on Just a Damn Nerd, this round is a tie, with a score of 5-5. So, we're looking at a tie matchup as we move on to the next round here. Round 2 is gameplay. Mortal Kombat guy?
Round 2. Fight!
So both games feature light puzzle solving, and both games feature heavy resource management you'd expect in a survival horror title. But the real meat of gameplay in any game is always, always, always the combat. And these games take very different approaches to making their combat challenging. Resident Evil 2's remake went with a unfortunate, in my opinion, decision of making the enemies light to ultra heavy bullet sponges. Some zombies in Resident Evil 2's remake can take 7 headshots to kill, which is just flat obsessive. While Alan Wake went with speed, both games actually take about the same time to kill, because in Alan Wake you have to aim your flashlight at your opponent until they become vulnerable. But the game just feels so much faster. And if you know anything about the damn nerds, you know I prefer games to feel faster. I feel like I need to move and be on my toes with Alan Wake, whereas with Resident Evil 2 I often feel like I can just kind of stand back and repeatedly shoot the zombie in its face. But another important part of gameplay with any horror game is how scary they are. And both of these games can be quite scary, but I do believe Alan Wake has a pretty substantial advantage in the scary factor for me personally. The zombies are kind of slow and uncoordinated in Resident Evil 2's remake, so they don't really feel as intimidating as I think Capcom really wanted them to. While the enemies in Alan Wake rush at you fast and they're manic, which feels far more intimidating. What it really came down to in this round was design choices. What part of the design is better? What choice is more fun? Is it bullet sponges or fast-moving manic enemies? Well, I personally think fast-moving manic enemies are substantially more fun. So this round is 100% going to Alan Wake with a score of 8-2. Next up is engagement. Now, engagement is important in every game. The question is, how long can you play a game for that you get addicted to it, and does it take over your free time?
Round 3. Fight!
Both these games do an incredibly good job of engagement. Alan Wake has a dark, moody atmosphere. I really like how Alan will read his own pages of his manuscript to you, and also narrates his inner thoughts. I like the inner monologue part, and it makes me feel more engaged with the game. As a matter of fact, Alan Wake's only shortcoming in the engagement area is occasionally the game pulls you out of it by constantly having chapter end screens. The game is done more like a TV show than like a movie, and because of that, a lot of times I'm pulled out of the game every time the chapter end screen comes up. Resident Evil 2 Remake, on the other hand, is an absolute masterclass in engagement. From extreme gore to incredibly dark environments, monsters crawling through hallways, very tight areas. Resident Evil 2 has almost an oppressive feeling of darkness, and I have managed to go through Resident Evil 2 Remake 3 separate times, while I've only managed to get through Alan Wake once. That's not an indictment on Alan Wake, it's just that Resident Evil 2 Remake feels far more engaging to me, even with the frustrating combat. So, the winner of this round with 7 out of 10 points is Resident Evil 2. Next up is story. Now, story is so important to basically every game. It's what keeps us engaged. It's what keeps us committed to the game. It's what keeps us wanting to come back.
Round 4. Fight!
There you are. Come here.
What is it?
Take a look.
Oh my god, he made it!
You know him?
Yeah, it's Leon. Kennedy, I think?
Hey! Claire?
Leon! I'll be right there!
Both of these two game stories are top notch in the survival horror genre. Let's start with Alan Wake. Now, Alan Wake wears its Stephen King inspiration on its sleeve. Alan is being pursued by an omnipresent force called the Darkness, which is actually darkness itself. It encases the enemies and forces you to use a flashlight to make them vulnerable before you can even hurt them. Alan Wake is supported by excellent voice acting, and in the new version, very good graphics. Resident Evil 2, on the other hand, is more of a survival story. You see, Claire Redfield arrives in Raccoon City looking for her lost brother. She's very quickly assaulted by zombies, rescued by Leon, and the two are split up. You're forced to flee to the Raccoon City police station, where you're forced to try to survive while being pursued by giant monsters, bioweapons, and maybe a few corrupt Umbrella employees. Both of these stories actually have their place in the genre and are very good in their own rights. However, I would say Resident Evil 2 is an excellent survival horror story. I would say Alan Wake is an excellent horror story. The difference is Alan Wake is definitely better as far as its intimidation factor. You see, fear is a big important part of any horror story. And Alan Wake is far scarier, mostly because the antagonist of Alan Wake spends the majority of the game being invisible. Anytime you don't see the antagonist, it makes the antagonist more scary. While in Resident Evil 2, the titular Mr. X stalks you for half the game, and the majority of your enemies are straight in front of you, plus you have an arsenal of weapons to deal with just about any threat. So, because Alan Wake is a little scarier, and also because Alan Wake is considered by most to be one of the best stories in the industry, the winner of this round, with 6 of a potential 10 points, is Alan Wake. Next up is Immersion. Immersion is as important as suspension of disbelief in movies. When you're immersed in a video game, you almost feel like you're transported into the world you're playing in. And it's so important to be able to pull this off.
Round 5. Fight!
Doesn't. Why is that? Because I'm lying? Or because you don't want to admit that you're not well?
Anything outside of writing is a struggle. I feel ill. I managed to make my way downstairs. There's a shoebox filled with books and papers by Thomas Zane. It's very hard to focus, but I managed to read some of it. He's a poet, and a good one. He writes of muses and creators summoning fabulous things from a magic lake.
got something to show you. It's important.
All right, I'm on my way.
Unfortunately, this is one of the most one-sided categories in this entire competition. Now, it's not that Alan Wake necessarily has bad immersion, it's just that Resident Evil 2 has some of the best immersion I think I've ever seen in a video game. Going down dark hallways is truly creepy. The lighting and shadowing in this game is incredible, and it's very easy to get pulled into it if you're playing in a dark room. Plus, it adds in Dolby Atmos and 3D sound, which actually even more helps with the immersion. The problem with Alan Wake's immersion is the fact that it feels the need to constantly end and go to these chapter in TV show style screens. Now, I love TV shows as much as the next guy, but you're not playing a TV show. So every time one of these screens come up, my immersion is broken. But that's not to say Alan Wake has bad immersion. If Alan Wake was against any other game, it probably would do better. But Resident Evil 2's immersion is absolute top-notch. Masterclass. So, Resident Evil 2 crushes in this round. Resident Evil 2 wins the immersion round 9-1. We have reached the final round, which is Fun Factor. Now, in cases where it looks like there could theoretically be a tie, we're going to add 1 point to Fun Factor. So Fun Factor will now be worth 11 points instead of 10, because if Alan Wake picked up 7 points in this round in a 10-point round, this would be a 30-30 tie. So we can't have that. So instead, this round will be worth 11 points. Let's see which one of these two games is the most fun.
Final round. Fight!
So, when we look at this, Alan Wake was able to pick up a win in story and gameplay, a big win in gameplay, but Resident Evil won every other category. And while story and gameplay probably are the two most important categories, 2 wins out of 6 competitions is hardly dominating. When I think about playing these two games and which one's more fun, I do find Alan Wake's combat to be more fun. And I find this story to be about equally engaging. Just because I think Alan Wake's story is better written and better voice acted doesn't mean I think it's more engaging than Resident Evil 2's. Really, the only glaring issue that even gives Alan Wake a chance to pull an upset in Fun Factor is the Resident Evil 2 combat. But at the end of the day, Resident Evil 2 won most of the rounds, and it turns out that David is not knocking off Goliath today. The winner of Fun Factor and the winner of the overall competition is Resident Evil 2.